Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce, SAS Middle East, so in that way they can give you a presentation about, how their solution, how their technology can help you in uncovering all this fraud. What they are offering in SAS, they are saying you as investigators, you can do it alone. Why? Because the fraud is massive. You need a tool to have in your hand that will help you to narrow down everything, to use machine learning, to use analytics to be able to target exactly where fraud is happening, so your investigation is much easier.
Thank you guys. Thank you for joining the session today. My name is Varun Mehta. I lead the fraud practice, the fraud and security intelligence practice in SAS Middle East. I'm thankful to Ayad for helping us sponsor the event. What we've got out here, as Ayad mentioned, we've got an enterprise fraud platform from SAS. Now, for those of you who don't know SAS, I've got like a one-slide presentation about what SAS is. We've been in the industry of analytics or business analytics for the last 41 years. Unlike any other software company, we actually reinvest a lot of our revenues back into R&D. So the industry average today stands at about 12%, but we are at 25%, which is more than almost double the industry average. One of the best measures about SAS has been our customer retention. So back in 1976, when SAS started, the first 10 customers who started working with SAS, 9 of those 10 are still working with us. So that's the kind of relationship we spend with our customers. We're a global company. We spend about, we've got about offices in several different countries, and we've got more than 80,000 customers across 148 countries. Now, I just got some reference customers internationally as well as some of the local customers. I won't spend too much on that, but a lot of my banking friends would remember us from some of the meetings. I often visit a lot of banks and government agencies out here in the region. We're not just internally referring to SAS as a global leader, but also some of the industry analysts like to talk us about leaders in either fraud management, big data, predictive analytics, advanced analytics, whether it is data integration, data quality, whether it is reporting, as well as enterprise business intelligence. So just a quick look about the fraud platform. I think Ayad touched a very important point today about real life fraud, and I'm just going to continue that a lot. Now, SAS obviously works with a lot of customers like you guys. And one of the things we've seen some really good examples of real life fraud. I've got 2 areas to touch today. I'll touch with banking first, so some of my banking friends would be happier to see that. But I've also got a very interesting domain which is called procurement fraud. And that is something which almost all our organizations go through. A lot of those people don't see that because they never realize how to find that fraud. So let's go first. Our platform actually allows us to cover several different areas. So right up here, you've got something like online fraud, retail. So we cover retail industry, insurance, compliance, banking, whether it is mobile banking, whether it is healthcare fraud, anything to do with procurement, applications, bust out, a very good example, which Ayad had also mentioned. We also do mortgage, subscription. But the best part is it's actually a single platform, and the platform allows us to do all of that across a single platform. We don't have to change the platform. We don't go ever. You actually end up buying a single technology platform which allows you to do all of them or different ones. Let's just go to something from a banking perspective, a real world banking fraud. Now, back in 2017, I've been talking to several banks, and what we've realized is there's several hot topics in this part of the world which have gained traction with a lot of customers. Account takeover is a very, very common problem. Now, the synthesis of it could be either a cybersecurity, a phishing scam, or anything. Now, we've also got something for payment card theft, so something like card not present fraud, and whether it is electronic espionage or mule accounts. Now, let me give you an example of a real mule account story. Unfortunately, I can't put the name of the customer on this slide, but we've really uncovered using SaaS platform and a real example of this case. Now here, the victim was doing nothing, but they were accessing their mobile banking and internet banking websites. They were just doing a simple transaction. one of the victims reported for an actual fraud case, and then we were trying to uncover what exactly happened. So we went back to the victim's account. We looked at different kinds of data, whether it was monetary data, non-monetary data. And when I'm saying non-monetary data, I'm actually talking about things like change of address, change of PIN code. Now, this was a very interesting example. So a customer was not using his account for a long time. This was a dormant customer, a customer who does not like to use banking for a long time. They have a lot of money in the bank, but they've not been using it. A guy inside allowed a change of address and a change of phone number to happen. The online victim suddenly took over the account. They transferred a massive amount of money out of this account. But remember, transferring massive amounts of money outside a bank account usually gets caught. A lot of banks monitor this. In this case, even though the bank was monitoring, it went under the radar. The reason was something called as mule accounts. A lot of our friends know these terms very well. It's a very common scheme of things. So what happens if you're traveling a large amount of sum from a single account? Usually bank systems will identify. So what the perpetrators of fraud do, they basically break down these amounts, large amounts, into small transactions, which can go under the radar. They don't get caught because they're not being monitored at that level. But one of the interesting things they do is they cash them out immediately. Now remember, from the start to the end, it takes about 30 minutes for a guy to lose all of his money from a certain account. And it's a disaster. For somebody who's gone through this, they might have lost like $1 million within the next 30 minutes. And that's a huge number to lose. So what happens is, now a platform like SAS, when brought into this picture, we actually have got several red zone indicators. For example, a sudden change of bank account or a bank phone number immediately followed by a high value withdrawal will be immediately flagged and actually be blocked by the bank itself. So unlike in this case where something happened end to end within the 30 minutes, we would have actually caught it right at the first 5-minute interval itself, and we would have real time blocked the transaction. So what it allows the banks to do is identify those cases, and there are several different parameters. For example, large value of mule account transfers, or like large value of low value transfers to several accounts from a single bank account, again can be a red flag. Now these are different analytical scenarios as well as rules that SAS brings to the table by default. So banks who acquire these solutions usually get a lot of this patented technology into the platform by default. Now this was a good example for, say, banks. Now I want to move to another example which is related to procurement fraud. Now, a lot of the companies that we work with, almost every single company goes and does a lot of procurement. For example, any company today actually would have to work with devices, laptops, mobiles, anything. What a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of procurement happening for each of these devices. For everything that you use in a company, you actually have a procurement department. And usually the procurement department reports to a certain operational unit. It doesn't go anywhere apart from an audit framework. Now a lot of you, I'm sure, come from the audit background also and have a function in the organization to do internal auditing. So we had a solution like this, and we've sold it to at least our first few customers at a very high value. And we've got some real bizarre examples of things that we could uncover within the first 3 months. So we deployed a SaaS solution into a customer environment, and we really found out some really interesting examples. But before that, let's talk about how big the problem is. Now, procurement industry by itself is a $3.7 trillion industry. Remember, it's a huge industry. This is where the money is. This is where the money goes. So the places where companies spend their money is in 2 areas: employee salaries, as well as reimbursements, and the third area is procurement. So what fraudsters do is they actually target this area and they go under the radar very quickly because it's actually done by the internal teams. And I'm not naming some of the people here saying, well, these are the teams that are doing it, but what we've seen is some very bizarre examples of these things. So I've got some news articles coming on from the news where we've seen some procurement companies being responsible for fraud itself. But I want to come to the crux of it. Remember, when we first deployed our solution and we saw some really interesting examples. So a very common example was in a certain company, we found out about 8,000 employees were working. 140 employees were over the age of 80. Remember, they were over the age of 80, where the official government retirement age was 63. For the last 17 plus years, these 140 individuals were getting their salaries. And you know what was happening? So there were some internal employees. What they were doing was, the moment a person would resign or leave the salary or the job or retire, what they would do is they would not finish his payroll. They would simply change his bank account and the contact details to a bank account that they were controlling. And we found out 140 incidents where people were getting their salaries for the last 17 years. There was another example of a company deploying large amount of contract employees. Okay, a lot of companies do this. Oil and gas, banks, a lot of companies actually outsource this business. And usually the contracts are time and material. What happens is you actually get contracts which are based on time and material agreements, where time is recorded and material values are being supplied to the vendors. And we saw so many examples of duplicate invoices going forward, where the employees were mentioned in 3 different projects at the same time. And not just in a bank or in an enterprise or in a corporate customer, we've seen the same trend happening in governments as well. So a lot of government grant schemes actually run up to the risk of this thing, where we have ghost vendors. There were another excellent example. We found out the procurement head of the company actually had all the orders going to a single company. So there was a preferred vendor for the company. All the orders would go to the single company, and then that company would get them any other vendor that they would like to. Only to realize the procurement head of the company had a wife and she owned that preferred vendor company. At the end, making large amount of material benefits. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is something like what Ayad, in continuation to what Ayad was mentioning, we've got several different examples of real life stories that come to us. And unfortunately, a lot of times they go missing because of the elements of data, the challenges that each organization have there with their data. Now, thankfully, SAS has got an enterprise-wide platform that covers all of these areas, whether it is procurement fraud, banking fraud, insurance claim fraud, healthcare, any kind of different fraud. And the best part is you don't have to change the platform. You run the same platform, the same technology that covers many different agnostic industries. At this stage, I'm going to thanks Ayad for giving us a chance to speak on this. I have my details and I'm around. If you have any questions, please feel free to come and talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.